And just a few brief welcome remarks. Can everyone hear me? Yes, great. So welcome everyone to the Innovators Toolkit workshop on design thinking. It is my pleasure to also introduce our presenter, Kelly Wyche, whom I will introduce shortly. Before we let Kelly take the stage, I wanted to cover some basic housekeeping rules to make sure that we all have a great experience. First, if you haven't done so already, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. And if you are comfortable doing so, please turn on your camera. This will be especially important later when you work in breakout rooms, and it will help make sure that Kelly has a more engaged experience. And while I introduce Kelly, please use the chat function to say hi, share your name, your pronouns, anything else that you think the group should know. And during the workshop, if any questions come up, feel free to also put your questions in the chat function. We'll try to pause to answer them, and otherwise we'll use some time at the end to answer your questions. So without further ado, here is Kelly Wyche, who recently graduated with an MBA from Yale School of Management. In her own words, Kelly is committed to bringing new revolutionary ideas to the world through sustainable design and innovative business models. Kelly can share a little bit more about herself and her work. And so Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I'm happy to be here. I also worked with Tsai CITY while I was getting my MBA at Yale and love the organization and the work that they do. So I'm honored to be asked back to do this workshop for you all. And I really appreciate the new format of opening up this series to the public, because I think there's a lot of really great tools that Tsai has to share. So thank you all for being here. I see someone in the chat asked if they can record the event. I know Ellen said that you guys are recording it, but please continue to ask questions and introduce yourselves in the chat. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. And please stop me. I can only see like a couple boxes on the side with the screen presenting. So if someone has a question, unmute yourself, interrupt. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So in the spirit of being interactive, I wanted to start just with introductions. So I am going to share a little bit more about myself and my experience in design thinking that's pretty varied. But really my goal is to introduce not just design thinking, but equity-centered design, which is something that I'm focusing on, and then also to make this tangible and applicable to you. So design thinking can honestly be applied in so many different ways. So it's helpful for me to understand the group that I have here. What are some of your goals? What areas do you guys work in? What are you interested in learning about design thinking? You know, trying to follow some of the design thinking practices, understanding who your audience is. That's really my intention. And while we can't collect that information from everyone, I would love to take just a quick minute or two for anyone in the group who would like to share more than just in the chat box, you know, what brought you to this workshop? What are you looking to learn based on, you know, your job right now, or the way that you could apply design thinking? And yeah, what are you working on? If a couple people are open to sharing, I think that'd be a great way to start off so we can make sure that this is relevant to the group.
Hey, Kelly.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, Kelly. I'm Ines. I'm a first-year MEM student, currently based in Jakarta, Indonesia. So it was like very early in the morning. So yeah, I have a background in environmental engineering and also a few years of work experience in nonprofit, because at first I feel that my engineering experience is kind of far to give social impact. But currently at MEM, I plan to, you know, kind of, yeah, you know, if possible, kind of create something that is marketable in terms of like a product in environmental engineering, but not only the product that has a market, but also the one that relates to people, you know, like I think a lot of people kind of think that I think people won't buy something just because it's good for the environment. So I wanna, you know, like learn. I know the term like human-centered design, so I just wanna learn that in this workshop.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
You are in the right place. I love that. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Sure, I'll go. My name is Beatrice Shea, and I am a student trying to get my master's in musical arts at the School of Music here at Yale. I'm a violinist, and as an artist, as a creative, seeking to find ways to intersect my field with a social justice, equity, accessibility perspective. I'm very interested in different ways of approaching creativity, engaging with new modes of thinking so that I can further engage with other artists and people outside of my field in finding that intersection.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Anyone else?
Hi, Kelly. I'm Miles. I'm a student athlete at Yale, and I'm interested in helping student athletes through technology.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, last call and then we'll move on. All right. And you guys, you might have to bear with me. I'm getting some text message notifications, but I don't want to pause to turn them off. So if you see them on the screen, just we're gonna keep moving. Oh, you're good? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna give you guys a little background about myself, and then hopefully we can get into all the juicy stuff that you guys have come to learn about. So I got started in my career post-undergraduate schooling at Target in Minnesota, and I was doing product development. So a way that I like to explain design thinking is taking an idea to implementation, right? Taking anything from an idea to actually putting in someone's hand, whether it be a product, a service, a t-shirt. I was doing apparel at Target. So I got a lot of experience in product development on the apparel side, you know, financial forecasting, looking at supply chains, managing inventory. And I didn't realize at the time that that really was a basis in design thinking. It just wasn't being called that at the time. So I left Target and I went to work at Duke Energy, which is a large utility. It's headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina, and serves a lot of the southeast of our country. It's the largest investor-owned utility and one of the few utilities that has an innovation team. So I joined their innovation team doing product development, and this looked like everything from microgrid projects to mobile apps that told people how much energy their home used to electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So taking all of those projects from an idea of this is something that we should do, you know, doesn't make money, do people want it, how do we fund it, how do we make it good and successful, all the way through implementation. And working at a regulated utility, a lot of those projects were super long term. It took years to get our first microgrid, you know, built and off the ground. So a really long time frame between the idea and actually getting it to come to fruition. And there was a lot of cycles of iteration along that journey. And then I came to business school after working at Duke Energy and had the opportunity to intern and work with a company called IDEO that is pretty well known in the human-centered design world. And I would say, in my opinion, really did kind of carve out this brand of human-centered design and what the value is in doing something simple, which is just asking people what they want. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But that was a great experience to really learn from, you know, those at the top of the game in terms of human-centered design and design thinking. What is this? What are big corporate clients asking for when they hire a design thinking firm? And what does that skill set bring to the table? So we did a lot of design research, strategies, and collecting all of that data that helps make human-centered design projects successful. We also did a lot of corporate ventures. So corporations that already have a running business model that want to start something a little new and different and have the funds to do that, strategy around doing that and getting that off the ground, which is very different than a startup, something starting from nothing. and a lot of branding and communication design. How do you make something look good and sound good in addition to be a great service? So that sort of brought me through my Yale career. And then coming out of school in 2020, y'all know, global pandemic hit, graduated in the midst of that, and partially because of a really tough market and also just sort of reevaluating some of the systems in our society that I think the last couple of months have really cast a light on are not serving us, at least in my opinion. I just felt called to do something that felt more impactful than working for a big consulting firm. And so I founded my own company, which is called Collective Power. And essentially what we do is we bring equity-centered design, which is an extension of human-centered design, to community and infrastructure development. So intentional communities, people who are trying to build systems and space on their own, helping them sort of organize as a community, understand what the vision is, and make sure equity is a part of that vision, and then translate that into how they then build the systems, infrastructure, energy, power, and water for their communities. So that is where I am now, which has been really excited and brought a lot of new lenses to design thinking, community design thinking, which I hope to share with you guys today. So please jump in with any questions. So I want to start with human-centered design. Someone brought that up before, and the way that IDEO defines this is a creative approach to problem solving that starts with people. And so this starting with people, I think, is really key. It's a basic concept that kind of, when you really think about it, it's surprising that it's even a thing in and of itself, but just ask people what they want and continue coming back to those people and asking what they want. Understand that sometimes it takes more than just asking someone to really get that answer. Sometimes people will tell you what they want, but their behaviors will tell you differently. So this constant need for design research, for going back to whoever is using the service or whoever's using the product, and getting their feedback and getting their experience with that product, and then incorporating that into what you're building. So this constant iteration that is using humans as the source of information on how we should design, how we should build, to make sure that this is going to be a successful product that people love. And I think three of the biggest parts of this are empathy, right? Being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and really be in the minds of those who have totally different needs than you. Diversity, so being able to pull in a large group of people, knowing that probably whatever you're building, you'll want to interact with a large group of diverse people. So making sure you're not just getting one type of feedback, but a diverse set of feedback. And then again, the feedback itself. So how are you crafting your search? Are you looking for quantitative feedback or qualitative feedback? Are you looking for a huge data set of people so you can really prove out on a scale? Are you looking for nuanced details of how people think and interact with this brand and experience? Or is it everything, right? But crafting a strategy of how you're going to get initial feedback on an idea and then continue to get feedback as you develop that further, I think are all core pieces of doing something from a human-centered design perspective. And so where I like to push human-centered design is into this world of equity-centered design. And when we talk about equity-centered design, I want to start with work that has been done by an organization called Creative Reaction Lab. They're located in, I believe, St. Louis, Missouri. And I have a link on here I can send out later for you guys to see more of their work. But they've coined a framework around equity-centered community design. So I just want to read you the work that they've already done and shared freely. There's a free field guide that you can download from their website to help people bring equity into this design work. So they're really, in my mind, the kind of pioneers of equity-centered design in the space of human-centered design. So equity-centered design is defined by Creative Reaction Lab, is a unique creative problem-solving process that's based on 5 things. So equity, of course, at the top, humility building, which when I think about this, how do you have conversations of equity without humility, right? I think it naturally brings up some points of conflict, and people come from different levels of understanding on what the inequities of our society are. So incorporating humility into having this conversation and pulling in the right people that have the right perspectives is really key. integrating history and healing practices. One of the communities that I've started working with is right outside of Atlanta, Georgia, 19 Black families that have come together that want to build a community that is safe for their children. And so understanding the history of Black people in this country forming communities is a really key part of being able to build something that, you know, fulfills their vision and is a safe and healing community. So knowing that we need to integrate history and healing when we're trying to build with equity, addressing power dynamics, so between the community itself and then also between who are the builders and who are the community and who makes the decision on what gets built and how is the community involved in that process. And then that I think brings us into co-creating with the community, which I think we hear a lot in the design world. We don't want to come in and tell you what to do. We want to come in and design with you, which is absolutely the right intention, but I think it's a lot harder in practice than we often realize. So I really love that this model calls out these specific skill sets that are needed to really design with equity and kind of gives you a blueprint to go back and say, how are we incorporating all of these practices into the way we're gathering our feedback, the way that we're structuring a concept, the way that we're taking that concept to different groups of people to continue to get feedback. To me, this is where equity comes into the general design thinking process, where it's maybe not just driven by, is this going to be profitable and sell X amount and make us the return on investment, but we're also judging this design project as, is it equitable? Does it take into account every part of the community? Have we integrated these different aspects of equity design into them? And are we prepared to continue to build on this in the spirit of iteration as more people might join the community or more people might join the project and have different needs? Pause for questions. Any questions? Okay. So that again was a lot rooted in the work that Creative Reaction Lab has done. I think to take it a little bit further and just thinking about equity-centered design, whether you're designing for a community or maybe it's not a community-based project. Equity-centered design, to me, takes human-centered design a step further by bringing some intentionality around who are the humans. So when we say human-centered design is about making sure we're going back to the people and asking what we want, equity-centered design asks, well, what people, right? Who are the people that we're going to? How are we understanding their experience and their needs, and how are we factoring that into this feedback that we get and how we want to build using that feedback? So the most basic question is which humans, right? How is our data set different across age, ability, their individual experience, nationality, race, gender, understanding who's in the room when you're doing this brainstorming. And we're going to come back to that later when we do our exercise. And then again, how do we integrate equity? So are there opportunities to make what we're doing more accessible? I've seen a lot more like sliding scale business models lately of people pay what you want and we can help subsidize. And I think that's a great approach to accessibility if that's important to your design and to your community. How do you build more inclusive experiences that take the community as a whole into account? So it's a different thing to design for individual experiences than to design for a community, right? You have a system that's in place and you might need to do research and understand the community needs in a different way than you would understand a bunch of different individuals' needs. And then the last piece of how do we build community, right? What's the structure? How do we organize, mobilize? What's our expectation of how much people are going to participate in the building of these spaces and the maintenance of these spaces? And how do we set expectations around that for the community? So I think moving a little bit away from the equity-centered design piece, which is just something that I wanted to introduce to the group because it is more on the newer side of what's happening in human-centered design thinking, and I think it's a really important development of human-centered design. I want to take you guys to a different framework that is very well known in the human-centered design world that I think offers a really helpful approach to how do I evaluate this idea that I have from a design thinking lens, especially when it's early on. So this framework really looks at three aspects of whatever you're doing. desirability, viability, and feasibility. So desirability is basic. Do people want it? And this is the human part. This is where you're doing a lot of research. This is where you're getting feedback. This is where you're talking to people about your idea. This, I think, is really the heart of the human-centered design, because it is the human part. But the other two aspects are really key, and that they are levers to help you understand if this, amazing idea that you want to get off the ground is feasible and what it's going to take. So when we think about feasibility, like, can this even happen? A lot of times it's a technology thing. Does this technology exist to do this? Are there government regulations in place of doing this? Less about competitive, like, is someone else already doing it and I can't, but really, like, what would it take to get this off the ground? So required investment. How costly is it going to be to get this off the ground? This is where you might ask, is there a way to, like, bootstrap this and do a pilot first and then translate that into something else? But assessing what would it take to get this done from a high level. And then the third one, viability, will it make money? So even if we know that everything exists to get this off the ground, and the right knowledge is out there, and the technology is at the right place, and we have a land, I'm thinking in my, like, intentional community mind, but whatever the different parts are that you're trying to get into place to see if this is something that's feasible, the viability aspect is, okay, based on how much it's going to take to get that up and running, does the math work out, right? Revenue and cost. Can we make enough back from what it's going to take to put this project together to really make it successful? And here's where I think, in the current moment that we're in now, I really like to push people past the point of, your typical business model of we need to charge, or we need to bring in this much revenue to offset the cost, and say, like, one thing that I love that Tsai City did in our last accelerator is not only were they funding and looking for student entrepreneurs that were looking to launch a company, but they were also open to projects, right? So it doesn't have to be this sustaining business that you're going to grow and scale for the next 10 years. If you want to put on a film festival and you need X amount to start it up, and maybe you don't want to charge people anything because you want it to be accessible to everyone and you think it's going to be amazing, that might not first seem like, in terms of viability, like, how are we going to offset those costs if we don't want to charge people? But I like to push people to think differently about different sources of funding. I know you guys are at Yale, a lot of money floating around at Yale, and just because an idea doesn't have the typical, we're gonna turn a profit in X years and scale up from there, doesn't mean that it's not still worth doing, and looking into less traditional business models of getting something funded and done if there's value to the project, especially looking at things from an equity lens. I just encourage a design thinker to always push past a more traditional approach to starting a project or a business, and think about different ways to fund, different ways to leverage, a pilot that might be lower cost in the beginning, but can give you a lot of really valuable information on how people are reacting to what you're doing. If the idea even resonates, like, we're going to get into prototyping later, but sometimes that's the best way to prototype, is just to try to do something that's a pop-up or a smaller version and see how it goes. So all this to say, within these three lenses of desirability, viability, and feasibility, push yourself. If you have a really strong feeling on the human part, and the other two pieces are much more complicated to make business sense, push yourself to explore alternative funding and scaling up strategies, because I've seen it done really well in the past, and I think that's where true innovation really starts to happen, is when people are willing to do things differently. So we're going to jump into our exercise briefly, but an approach to looking at potential projects from each of these lenses. With desirability, I think, again, this is the human part, and we're going to do a little a brainstorming exercise that really shows kind of like all the data that you can collect through just starting with yourself or a small group of people that you feel close with and want to share the idea with, and structuring either a workshop or a survey to get their feedback on what you want to do. Try to empathize and look at their perspective of the idea, either as a customer or an investor, just someone who you want to get feedback from, and use that information that you gather to really validate from a desirability perspective. Do people want this? Do I just want it? You know, be able to separate your own interests from either a business that you're building or the project that you're building. But to me, with desirability, the key is to really get a sense of how people are reacting to it. And we're going to do a little exercise with that later. With feasibility, it's really about prototyping, understanding if it can be built, what does it take to build. We're going to go through different examples of prototyping, but you can start out with something that is very low cost and low resolution, but gets the idea across. And that's really all you need as a starting point. And then viability, like I said, really the two main levers are revenue cost, but being open to other business models that might not be the most traditional to get your project funded and to get something off the ground. And then I wanted to highlight with desirability, which we'll get into, when you're talking to these people about your idea, equity-centered design, I think, pushes us to really reflect on who are we talking to, who are we including, and how could the design be limited by people that we're not including. So in my mind, the more inclusive, the better the quality of design is. And so I think it's always good to push yourself in that sense. So today, I would like to do a workshop with you guys that's similar to what I've been doing with different intentional communities. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over a little bit more the equity-centered community design framework and how it might relate to a brainstorming exercise. And we're gonna think about our needs, wants, and pain points for certain utilities. So one thing that I really love about this work is that everybody on this call, right, has had some experience with power company, turn the lights on, plug their phone in. Maybe you haven't paid your own bill yet, but I'm sure a lot of people have. But your power, your water, your internet or your broadband connectivity, and waste management services. Like I remember coming to Yale and being disappointed that there wasn't a more comprehensive composting system available, and so had a lot of really interesting conversations around what that could look like. So I thought these 4 topics would be good to bring to the group because everyone has had some experience with them. And so what we're gonna do eventually is break into 4 groups and have each group brainstorm within one of those categories what some of their needs, wants, and pain points are. But before we get to that point, I want to circle back to equity-centered design because I think one of the most important definitions in this framework is just of equity. I think if you start there, the design piece starts to kind of tell its own story. So the way that I like to define equity is ensuring that people have what they need to be successful, considering a wide range of factors that make those needs different from person to person. So by contrast, equality would be ensuring that everyone has the same thing. I don't know how many of you guys might have seen like a meme that's floating around on the interwebs, but it has equity being, or it has equality being everyone getting a last step ladder that's the same level, knowing that people are different heights and they can't quite reach where they need to go, versus equity being each person getting the right height ladder that they need to reach where they need to go. So the idea that we need to understand each person individually, understand their needs, and then to me, the design component comes in from, we have to design something that works for everyone. We can't design something assuming that if it's equal for everyone, people are going to be covered, because we live in a world where often that's not the case. So starting with that understanding of equity, to me, makes it very clear why you need a diverse range of perspectives at the table when you're starting to formulate the needs, when you're starting to formulate kind of what this product would need to be to serve everyone. If you can't ask that broad range of everyone, then you're not going to be successful in designing and building in that way, if that is your goal. So with that in mind, the way that I would love to do our workshop, since we're doing a virtual version, we've talked about equity-centered design. We've defined the areas that we're going to brainstorm in terms of utilities and basic services. And so for this brainstorm, we're going to separate you guys out into 4 groups. Ellen and I will be coming through to kind of help facilitate. But in each group, I want everyone to start off with maybe just like a general get to know each other. I know we haven't been interacting that much, and the breakout rooms can kind of be awkward. I've been there before. And then choose someone to maybe be the note taker or be responsible for reporting out when we come back to the full group, so that we can each kind of share within each topic what was talked about. But the goal is for everyone to brainstorm and share within these 3 categories. So what are your needs? I can give you guys some examples after this if it's hard to get specific with these utilities and water, but what are your needs? What are your wants? So this is like wants and dreams. If for power, your need is that the lights come on, your wants might be, I want my own, solar panel system that I can control. I want to be able to manage my energy. So even things that might not exist, we really want you to think wider and help us understand what could be possible for some of these. And then pain points. What are current things that you experience with some of these services, like not having compost as an option? That could be a pain point. And then from this conversation within the community that you guys are in this brainstorming group, try to identify if there are any potential points of conflict. So some things that come up often in these community-centered brainstorm is one person might really want, let's see, for example, for broadband, one person might really want a satellite dish, and other people are like, I don't want satellite dishes. So anything that might come up that's a point of conflict is important to highlight for reporting out to the group later. And then also at the end, I think we're going to give you guys maybe 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how things go. At the end, I think a really important part is to then reflect on, is there anything, like, look at the group that you guys will be randomly assigned, right? Who's in this group, whose opinions are being represented, and whose are not? And maybe have a conversation around, how is this design at this point, or how is this design research that we've gathered potentially limited by the perspectives that aren't there, especially when we think about ability, and when you're building physical systems that need to be accessible to everyone. So I think it's always good at the end of a brainstorm session to just kind of reflect on who is in the room and who's not, and how that might impact design decisions that are made off of this set of feedback. So I know that was a lot. I'm gonna leave some time for questions before we break out. And then lastly, I just want to show you guys, I know I said I had some examples. This was some of the output that came from another version of this workshop that we did, where we had people, so for this water, right, we have needs, something as basic as clean water. Some people want spring or well water. Some people want septic, right? That could be a point of conflict. And then we moved into wants. People talk about alkaline water refinery or community rain catchment. People talked a lot about the importance of protecting the quality of the water. We know we've seen situations like Flint happen, right? So how do we understand that in the context of a community coming together and wanting to make sure that their water is clean and safe and protected? And the pain points that came up. So what are things that are currently pain points about people's water access or water system? People not wanting fluoride in their water, which is obviously a common practice today. Not wanting to need Brita filters in their home and pay for that. So here's an example of some of the things that came out. I'm hoping that these categories feel accessible enough for everyone to brainstorm around. And again, I'm going to be coming through the different breakout rooms to help you guys if you get stuck or need a little bit of help. So how does that feel? Does anyone have questions before we break out, or even about the earlier part of the presentation?
Kelly, should we go back to the previous slide so people have like a chance to take a screenshot?
Absolutely. And I typed out these instructions that I can put in the chat so that anyone who goes into the breakout room can have them for later. Let's see, don't description on my screen. Okay, so I just put the instructions into the chat, and then I'll keep my screen on the instruction slide so you guys have that. And then, yeah, I know Ellen's going to start putting people into groups, but does anyone have questions while we do that about the presentation so far? Cool.
Are we ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so 15 minutes and then we can call early if everyone's done soon.
Okay.
Here we go.
So maybe let's spend a couple minutes sharing from each group some of the things that were talked about. I was able to kind of jump in and get some of the insights, and then we'll jump into the last part of the slides and end it with any questions that you guys have. So I'm gonna nominate Miles from the waste management group, and I know Rodrigo was also with him, to maybe share just a little bit highlights of what you talked about and anything interesting that came up in regards to the exercise.
Thank you. So our topic was waste management, and I covered a few topics or points related to the dorms at Yale. And one is that it's not easy for students to bring all their trash and separate it down in the basement of the residential colleges. So I think the school can do a better job of maybe providing bins for certain entryways and floors, and then making it a little more clear as to where to bring it, and having like both recycling and trash in the basements, because some of the basements I've seen are just like one huge bin, and I know that students kind of just dump everything in that, and that's not really that's not right, and I know it can get messy, so it's not right for the people working at Yale to have to clean that up. So that's one thing. And then what else? Oh, and then if Rodrigo had a few other points relating to some of the things he had, if he wants to touch on those. If not, it's all good.
Rodrigo, you got anything to add? Still on mute. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I think we discussed a bit like the needs. It was interesting because he's living on campus and I'm off campus.
Mm-hmm.
So the pain points, some of them were in common, like the timely pickup of the trash and like make sure the trash doesn't pile. Some other ones were like related to how the trash is managed in the campus or how the city manages it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's
I really like that you made the distinction that he's on campus and you're off campus, because I think that's a great example of being aware of who's in the room and whose opinion is being represented in terms of, okay, well, what does the system need to look like for students versus we're still Yale students, but we're not living in the dorms. So I think that's a great example of how paying attention to who's in that brainstorm and in that data collection can then tell you, based on this, we can now know that we have feedback from these two different groups of community members whose viewpoints are represented. So I'm happy you said that, Rodrigo. How about we go to water next? Inez and Naomi.
And I think my connection freezed.
Oh no, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, it might be Rodrigo that froze. So I think we had Inez and who else was in water? Susan, that's who it was, not Naomi. Sorry about that. You guys want to share?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I think after I share, Susan can add if you want. So yeah, we're in different parts of the world. Like I'm in Indonesia, Susan in the US. But at first we talk about the basic needs. We need clean water, affordable ones, and of course we need unlimited clean water, and we want that water to be accessible from everywhere, like not only in our house, but everywhere we go. Yeah, and that, yeah, so that probably we have bottled water. And what we want, yeah, from Susan and also from me, we want water efficiency, as well as like Susan wants to be able to also educate others of the importance of this water efficiency.
Mm.
And this idea actually is from Kelly, where we want to have individual water treatment system in our own house or like in the household scale, where we could create gray water from shower to be able to use it for shower again or further for drinking maybe. And yeah, some kind of like household drinking water. And this one is something that I think Jakarta or Indonesia really needs, which is rainwater harvesting systems, because we have rains all the time and there is floods everywhere. So I think this is a good thing to have in household so that those water could get used instead of like flooding the infrastructure. So for the pain points is first is fee. Yeah, because the fee of the water, like for in Indonesia, we have to kind of two source of water. The first one is like from groundwater, which is free, and for Susan lives in a condo, water, although the condo paid for the water, the fee could be actually high. So yeah, so Susan, do you want to add anything?
No, Inez, you did a really good job. No, you covered everything. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the brainstorming too. Yeah, so that's from us, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much. Something that made me think about with the water efficiency is I actually have to call out Tsai City or shout out Tsai City. So the first year I worked for Tsai City, I was advising a group of Yale students that were working on a company and a product called Droplet. And Droplet was an attachment to your water faucet that managed how much water not just you use that flowed through that stream, but also how much water you actually use. So it sensed kind of what you might use to brush your teeth or your hand and the interrupted flow. And it could tell you of the water that you were using in your home, how much were you actually using versus wasting, all with the goal of helping with efficiency. So Tsai has some great talent that is already working on that I have not forgot about. They're doing great things. And I thought about that when y'all said water efficiency. So thank you for sharing. And then our energy team. So Alex, Beatrice, and Naomi. And I think Jay.
Beatrice was our keeper of information. So I nominate that Beatrice describe what we went over.
All right.
Sure, I was typing away during our discussion, so yes, we got energy, and immediately we pointed out certain problems that we have with it. I think we went with a kind of like worst of the worst type of strategy. So we started off with talking about how Alex mentioned the cost of delivery specifically is outrageous, and that comes down to issues with maintenance, which I think we've all experienced. When something is down, it takes a while to get it back up. And we also talked about inconsistent access. Naomi had mentioned that, and for me also as a grad student, when the pandemic first hit and I had to go back home where I didn't have great access to energy power, that really impacted my studies because that impacted my internet. And when everything moved online, that was a very significant impact on what I was able to do and participate in. The quality of my education and other aspects of my life definitely were impacted. And Naomi also mentioned that for her and what she does professionally, it's important that she has consistent access as well. So that was a problem that we latched onto pretty quickly. Other issues related to cost of fuel, cost of implementation, the way the system is currently set up in terms of regulation that affects efficiency, innovation. When it comes to needs, we honed in on some of those problems and said that reasonable cost is absolutely necessary. We also wanted it to be environmentally sensitive. The consistency of access, once again, was a key point. And then when it came to wants, we started talking a lot about equity, and also how clean energy would be absolutely great to have, and we would all be willing to pay a little more so that we could have that. At the same time, we do want it to be cost effective and at scale, which is something that Naomi might be able to go into further detail about. We also touched on the aspect of individual empowerment. Kelly brought up intentional communities and the shift to a collective perspective to break down barriers within the system of regulation and distribution currently. But then that kind of led to us talking a little bit about pain points, and Naomi mentioned that there is tension there between access and who is able to move towards an intentional community right now, because it ends up being more of a luxury to be able to do that, and those who are less fortunate, therefore, or disadvantaged in some way, are left behind, and that just raises the inequities within the system. So those were the things that we managed to cover. And I don't know, Alex, Naomi, do you have anything that you want to chime in on?
I'm just pleased that we picked you because you did such a great job.
Right? Oh my gosh, that was great.
Agree. I think you just wrote a dissertation that was better than anything
yourself,
Alex and I said.
That Yale degree. That was great.
Well, I learned so
Go
much.
Yale.
I mean, it was really interesting just because, you know, Alex and Naomi are homeowners, and they have a different perspective on all of this, which, to be honest, I'm very out of my element when it comes to this sort of thing. I'm just, you know, a grad student who hasn't owned a home yet, is living the apartment life with roommates. So all of what they were talking about, I realized that I could relate to my own experiences as well. And I think in all of these different ways of life and stages of life, the impact of all of these problems you really see across the board. So that, I think, just reiterates how important it is to be looking at all these different perspectives within the community and deciding what is it for whom that you're addressing.
Absolutely. And even you know, I think, again, calling out the difference in experiences within your group, and maybe not thinking that you had as much experience, but knowing that there's value in the fact that you haven't owned a home, right? And that you're representing that perspective of people who don't have that experience, and how do they think about energy. So again, coming back to recognizing the different perspectives, and then seeing that they all have a value, particularly because they're distinct and because they bring something different and new to the table. So that was wonderful. Thank you guys so much for being engaged in the breakout rooms and participating. It's been awesome to hear your ideas. Any last questions on the exercise before we jump back in? I'm going to show you guys some examples of design thinking and then wrap it up. You ready? Cool.
Great.
Let's go back. Okay, so I think what we just did, it was a great example of human research, like we've been talking about, kind of the core part of human-centered design and design thinking and equity-centered design. So as you think about trying to do this in new ways around your own business or idea, or something that you're working on at work or in partnership with someone, when you're approaching this, there's so many different ways to get this feedback, right? It can be casual conversations with someone that you know, hey, I'm working on this thing, what's your initial reaction? It can be, you know, attending events or conferences. I ended up getting connected with the most recent intentional community that I'm working with because they hosted a camp out. They bought the land and they were like, we're having a camp out. So I was like, perfect, I'll come, see what's good. And so, you know, being open to different ways of engaging and connecting with people. Social media is also always a helpful tool, though I think in these days there's some ethics around how you want to use that. But then there's great tools for paid research. When I worked at IDEO, we did a ton of like paid Skype video calls, and there was surprisingly a huge market of people that will gladly take your money to tell them your opinion on things. But I think that works a little bit more when you're within a larger corporate structure that can afford that. But working at Duke, we used to get like Amazon gift cards and find people that were specifically the type of people that we wanted to get their feedback on something and have them come in and give Amazon gift cards. Qualtrics is a great tool in terms of having a larger database and having a survey that reaches a lot of different people. And I think a lot of these are pretty affordable depending on where you are in kind of a startup phase or what your resources are to get a pretty quality data research set on whatever you're looking to understand more about. So some tips that I would give when you're doing this is always develop a discussion guide so you kind of know what questions you want to ask and what you're looking to get the answers to. But with that in mind, be really open to hearing things that you don't expect. I think the best design researchers are those who can talk to people, but also can let like an awkward 7-second silence linger and see if someone has something else to say, right? Like there's strategies to make sure you're trying to give people the space to share everything. Sometimes people might not be as upfront with their true opinion and it takes a little longer. So I think in the world of design research, you kind of start to get an intuition, but starting off, I think the two big things that are kind of conflicting is know what you want to say and ask, but then also be flexible enough to kind of break away from that discussion guide if someone starts bringing up some feedback that's really interesting and unexpected. You know, be willing to follow that line of questioning. Another thing that I like to warn people about, particularly having worked in a more corporate world of design thinking, is the difference between testing and prototyping and validating, which I think is a very loved term in risk-averse environments where the intention will be, well, we want to validate this idea. So that means we want to prove that it's actually going to work, and we want to try to eliminate some risk around the uncertainty that is always there, of like putting something out in the world and kind of getting feedback and seeing how it goes. So I've seen validating look like, you know, we're gonna survey a bunch of people and based on their response decide, yep, people like this, cool, so we're gonna do it. And all this happens before a build or before something's released, where I really think the spirit of design thinking, if you've ever heard the analogy of building a bicycle, right? Instead of starting with the first wheel and then the second wheel and then the seat, where in each of those phases, you can't do anything with one wheel. You can't do anything with just two wheels and no handlebars. You can't, instead of approaching it that way, we start with a skateboard and then a scooter. And, you know, so in each iteration, there's something that is functional, and it might not be the final version of what we want, but we are comfortable iterating as things go. So to me, this helps to distinguish the difference between validating something of let's make sure this is exactly what we want before we put it out there, and testing something maybe that took a little bit less upfront cost to get off the ground as a prototype, but we're gonna get it out there, get the feedback, and adapt as we keep going, and not expect that we can get all the answers ahead of time to figure out, is this the right thing, and then do it, right? To embrace the risk that comes with that and iterate as things go. So I wanted to share a couple examples of prototyping because I think it's always helpful to see what people mean when they say prototyping, the different levels of fidelity that can be, and how you might prototype things that aren't a physical product and might be a little bit more complicated. So with software and user experience prototypes, you know, an app, a website, those nowadays we have a ton of tools to be able to mock up, you know, even if it's just drawings of what you want the screen to look like. In the bottom picture under here, it's literally pencil drawings, but you can have wireframes that you create. There are lots of resources that will let you put together like a fake app screen and be able to present that to someone if you have an app that you want to design and you want to give people just an understanding of the basic functionality, how the look, the feel. That's a pretty straightforward path of prototyping where you can pretty much for free create some basic mock-ups and start showing them to people and getting an understanding. With physical prototypes, that can be a lot harder because sometimes there's technology, there's design, there's trial and error, there's getting it to work, there's getting it to small, getting the battery in small enough, you know, that's a process of iteration. But starting off with something that it could be, paper, wood. I believe down here, this is like the picture down here is like a different handle for some sort of sporting equipment. It looks like up here, I don't know what that is. But again, being bootstrappy about, can we just create something that will convey this concept effectively and allow us to get feedback on this concept? Those are the goals of prototyping. Are we getting the point across of what it is? And do they have a clear enough understanding where they can now give us feedback? And then the last category of experience is actually my favorite area to prototype in, because this can look so many different ways. So what you see here in the top is around a car. So maybe they're trying to get feedback on the experience. Maybe it's an electric vehicle, and they're just trying to get someone to feel like they're in the car and understand what are the things that they reach for, that they are, their instincts of being in a car that might be different in an EV. I don't know if that's actually what they're prototyping, but creating an experience in a different way. Like, imagine if you tried to really build out a prototype EV to get someone in versus doing something quick and bootstrappy where you get that feedback earlier on. There's a benefit to just trying to recreate an experience. And then in the picture on the bottom, you see they're using AR, which has become a very popular way to try to create prototype experiences. Another approach is if what you're designing is experience related. So maybe it's a service, maybe it's a festival, maybe it's an event. How do you scale that big idea down to something small, like a pilot, with 1/100th of the people that you're looking to get, and kind of recreate something that gets at what the experiences that you're trying to provide, but in a smaller way, maybe with people that you trust a little bit more in terms of giving you feedback, and then use that information to then help shape how you build something bigger. So prototyping can really apply to anything. And again, the goal is just to communicate your concept to someone effectively through a prototype and get feedback in return for that. Any questions on prototyping? Cool. So a couple of things I wanted to mention, just knowing that everyone is working in school in different places. Design thinking shows up in a lot of different ways, I think, across all industries right now. So my dad is a mainframe software developer who works for a big bank, and he is on an agile Scrum team, and they're working within this framework. So agile and Scrum processes definitely sit closely to the design thinking world. And the goal is to really create a self-sufficient, self-autonomous functioning team that has all the talent there to do the work. Usually it functions in a software setting, so they have all the engineers that know how to build what they need to build. And they have a product owner whose goal is to take all this input from the execs, the stakeholders, those that are using the product, and prioritize what do we need to build into this product, right? People are really loving this feature, so the next thing we need to do is, upgrade this feature so that it can work for more people, right? They're the people that are deciding what needs to happen, and they have a team around them that is already organized to be able to make that work happen. So a little less creative than the design thinking that we've been thinking about, but this is showing up a lot, I think, in workplaces that are trying to work a little bit more efficiently. And so instead of a waterfall approach of let's plan out for the next 2 years every single thing we're going to build in this project, which it maybe goes back to more of that validating. We want the plan to show us how we're going to move. This process embraces more of that iteration. Let's just get it out there and see the feedback. And now as we get the feedback, we continue to iterate and update this software product. And so this team is built around being able to iterate fast and do that within a corporate space. And then another framework that comes up a lot in design thinking, it's really simple and it's called Kanban. There might be some other terms for it, but essentially it is just having a physical representation of all of the things that you need to get done and moving those things to each, this is what we need to do, this is what we're currently working on, and this is what we've done. And in that physical representation, so we're talking big poster on the wall with all the post-it notes on that you need to do, that organization allows you to see, you know, how much you're actually focusing on and able to get done at the time, versus all the things that might be on your mind, and just offers a really clear way to break up the work and get things done in process. So this is another one that I've seen used a lot that probably pulls more on the aesthetic and the visual aspect of design thinking to help organize ways of getting things done, and something that I've personally used in many aspects of my life in terms of processes to accomplish different goals. So last part of this presentation is me just sharing a couple examples of design thinking that I think are really interesting. So the first one, I've been talking a little bit about community design work that I've been doing. And this is an example of an intentional community called Serenbe. It's in Chattahoochee Hills, Georgia. It's about 20 years old. So they've been developing this community for 20 years. I'm planning to go visit this weekend, which I'm really excited to see. But if you can tell on the map, they have different phases of the ground. So one is structured and built around education. There's an arts community. They have an agriculture community that is designed to support that. They have a health and wellness community. So they really have laid out a design for how these different areas of the community work together, why they're on different parts of the land, all the infrastructure that supports that particular community, and what their goals are and what their operations are. And it's beautiful to look at now, but it's definitely been a journey for them to get to that level of community design and thinking about how each part of the community's needs are being met, and how we build and design for equity in that. So there's a link that has a lot of cool information about their community if you're interested, and hopefully we'll be able to share these slides at the end. And then I think a more traditional example of design thinking that I always love to talk about is the Willow breast pump. So this was a product that IDEO was involved in designing for. They won a couple different awards for it. And to me, this is just like the most basic, clear example of human-centered design, in that what was in the market up until this point for breast pumps for women were some of the most like non-thoughtful products, to the point where you're like, has the design team ever even like talked to a breastfeeding woman? Like, you know, is there a woman on the team? And so really all IDEO did is talk to women, is say, what do women need in a breast pump, and facilitate that level of strategic design research and feedback, and ended up designing a product that won all these awards, because compared to what was on the market, it just met the needs of women in a way that nothing else did, right? And this was, what year was this? This was 2018, right? So it took 2018 for there to actually be a product in this market that felt like it lived up to human-centered design and really took into account what the users of this product needed. And there's some really great videos that kind of tell that story and explain the product and why it is designed with women in mind compared to what was already on the market. So those will also be included when I send this out to the group. Another example that I really love that I think hits home right now as we lead up to an election, IDEO also did a project of redesigning voting machines in LA to be more accessible. So to be more accessible to older people, to be more accessible to people with different abilities. So it has some hearing assistance, it has Braille, it's easier for wheelchairs to approach, a whole host of things that were taken into account all around how do we just make voting more accessible in this county. And then we can think about what are the implications of making voting accessible and why that's a potentially meaningful and impactful design project, and how equity plays into that very directly. And so I just thought this was a really great project to kind of show what design thinking can do in terms of impacting real parts of our system and our society. And then the last one, which I hope is one of the most accessible for anyone who is at a workplace, you know, a part of a university. This was something that Duke Energy did right before I came to business school, is they just crowdsourced employee ideas. They got a platform. There's many out there that have been built to do this. And they just had employees share their ideas. Different things got voted up. I was working in the innovation department at that time. So we ended up the ideas that surfaced to the top, we brought those people into our group. We had them work with us to kind of flesh out the concept of this idea. And we're really able to leverage, everyone can have great ideas, right? Like there's value in anyone's perspective, in anyone's opinion. You never know where that spark is going to come from. And so having a platform that kind of pulls that out of a large workplace can improve the culture, can make people feel heard. It can help lead to really innovative products and services because you're finding these great ideas. And it can also be a great way to share information between different parts of the company. If you've ever worked at a big corporation, you know how easy it can be to feel like you're in silos and not be able to share information. So tools like this, I think, are a really easy way to bring design thinking to whatever your organization is finding a way to crowdsource ideas. If it's a smaller organization, it can even be a more bootstrap approach than trying to get some software, but the intention of making sure everyone's voice is heard and creating a platform for that. So I did really great on timing because it is 7 o'clock. And that is the end of my presentation. Here's my information, email, phone. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions about the topics that were in this presentation. I'm happy to chat more about it. I hope this was helpful for you guys. If anyone has questions, I know we only have a minute or so left and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I really did appreciate y'all's participation and wonderful questions, and I'm gonna leave it there.
Thank you so much, Kelly. A round of silent virtual
Yay.
applause.
Thank you.
Very good. Very well spent 90 minutes.
Oh, thank you. So Ellen, is the process that we will send the slides out to the group after?
If you would like to, we can
Okay.
absolutely send the slides. We can make them available. Yep, I can touch base with you after. And we also have a recording of the main session in case that anyone's interested.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
Very nice.
And then I know Ellen put a feedback form in the chat.
Yes.
For a
please.
reminder, I know Tsai is great about collecting their feedback in the spirit
Yep.
of design thinking.
Because we want to hear what people want.
Yes.
So I will send an email out also with the link in case you don't have a chance to grab it now. But thank you everyone so much.
Yes, thank you guys so much for participating. It's been a fun
Thank you.
hour and a half.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.